Welcome to Chapter 1 Geography, Resources and Development. The current presentation contains resources, their definition, types of resources, resource development, resource planning, sustainable development and resource conservation. What is a resource? Resources are everything that is available in our environment which can satisfy our needs, and we should have technology to reach these resources. At the same time, they should not be very costly and every person should be able to buy them. Not only this, they should be in accordance with our linguistic and religious as well as cultural beliefs. There exists an interdependent relationship between nature, technology, and the institutions. When we transform natural gifts, we require technique, or in simple words, a method to transform these natural gifts. Not only this, we need organizations and institutions like the government that help us to transform and make these natural gifts usable. All this leads to satisfying the human wants and also leads to economic development. The resources available on the earth can be classified into different groups on the basis of their origin. They can also be classified on the basis of their exhaustibility. That means how long these resources are going to last. Then they can be classified on the basis of their ownership. That means who owns the resources and is responsible for its upkeep and maintenance. Then the resources can also be classified on the basis of how much they are developed, whether they are fully developed and are in use, or they can be developed in some future date. On the basis of origin, the resources could be biotic or abiotic. Biotic resources are the resources that we get from living organisms, whether they are plants or animals. Abiotic resources are the non-living resources which we get from the natural environment. They include water, minerals, etc. On the basis of exhaustibility, the resources could be renewable or non-renewable resources. Renewable resources are the resources which can be used again and again. They are inexhaustible. We have got an unlimited supply of these resources. Non-renewable resources, on the other hand, are the resources which are in limited supply. They are exhaustible in nature. The minerals present on the earth are non-renewable, whereas sunlight, wind, water are renewable resources. On the basis of ownership, resources could be individual, community-owned, national resources or international resources. Individual resources are the resources owned privately by people. A farmer's land, houses, plots, plantations are all examples of individual resources. Community-owned resources, on the other hand, are those resources which can be used by members of the community. The village grounds, ponds, public parks, picnic spots and playgrounds are examples of community-owned resources. The national resources are the resources that belong to the entire nation. They are maintained and constructed by the government. Roads, canals, railways, they are all examples of national resources. International resources are the resources which do not belong to any particular nation. There are international organizations which regulate the use of these resources. The oceanic resources beyond 200 nautical miles off the coast, they belong to the international community and are called the international resources. On the basis of status of development, the resources could be potential, developed, stock of resources or reserves. The potential resources are the resources which are available in a region but have not been utilized. For example, the solar and wind energy has got a tremendous potential in the coastal regions of peninsular India, but we have not been able to develop these resources. Hence, they are potential resources which can be developed in future. Developed resources are the resources which are already in use. We know their quality and we know the quantity of these resources available in a region. The coal fields of Jharkhand, the iron and steel industry in India are all examples of developed resources. Stock are the resources which are available in nature, but human beings do not have appropriate technology to use those resources. They might become usable in a future date, as and when we enhance the required technical know-how for using those resources. Reserves, on the other hand, are the resources available in nature. We also know the technical know-how of their use, but their use is being limited. They are not being completely used in all the regions. When we use resources for human benefit, it leads to many problems. The first and the foremost problem is of the depletion of resources. The resources, especially which are inexhaustible in nature, get depleted with use. Another problem associated with the development and use of resources is that the resources get accumulated in hands of few people who have the money and power to buy those resources. Hence, the society gets divided into groups where one group has access to resources and the other does not have. Those who do not have the access to resources are the poor, and those who have the access to resources are the rich. Another problem associated with use of resources is the environmental problem. Use of resources or indiscriminate use of resources leads to ecological crisis. There are problems such as that of global warming, depletion of ozone layer, degradation of environment, pollution of land, water and air resources. Resource planning. Resource planning is a widely accepted strategy for judicious use of resources. It involves identifying inventory of resources, economic and technological evolution, matching the resource development plan at regional and national levels. Since there are many problems which are associated with the use and development of resources, there is a need to plan the use of these resources. It is necessary that the resource distribution should be equitable so that there is sustainable development and global peace. Therefore, resource planning becomes very vital. Resource planning is the strategy that is widely acceptable for a judicious use of resources, because there are certain regions which have an enormous availability of resources and there are certain others which are critically deficient in those resources. Also, there are some regions which have the paying capacity of buying the resources, and there are certain regions which are extremely poor. Hence, resource planning for equitable distribution of resources among the global community becomes imperative, it becomes very necessary. Resource planning involves various stages. The first stage for planning resources is identification of resources. We need to survey, map and measure the resources available in a region. The resources available in a region need to be measured through surveys, they have to be mapped, and their quantities and qualities have to be ascertained. The next step of resource planning includes a planning structure, developing a planning structure using human skill, technology and institutional setup so that the resources can be developed in order to satisfy the needs of the human beings. The third and the final stage of resource planning includes the matching of resource planning between the regions and the national development. Resource planning is very important for a developing country like India. The reasons being: 1. The unequitable distribution of resources. Some regions within India are resource rich, whereas others are poor in availability of resources. Apart from that, wastage of resources can be minimized by correct planning of resources before we set out to develop resources. It also reduces pollution that is caused during the development and use of resources. Not only this, if we plan the development of resources, overexploitation of the resources can be avoided. All this will lead to a sustainable development of resources. There is an urgent need for the conservation of resources because unethical and irrational use and overuse of resources is leading to a number of social, economic and environmental problems. There is pollution of natural environment. There is extreme poverty in certain areas, all because of unequitable distribution of resources and their irrational consumption by certain rich and powerful regions. Therefore, it becomes imperative to conserve the resources in order to attain a sustainable development.